Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa, Mesa, and happy Thanksgiving. I'm Brian Perez, and we're ready for seconds. This is our second hour on Tuesday. We're recording this. We recorded this episode on Tuesday. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok on Tuesday, you can call us with your questions. The number's right there on the bottom of your screen. If you're listening on the radio on Thursday, stuck in traffic somewhere, headed to Grandma's house, well, thank you for having us along. Answering your questions today, we've got Brian Brodersen, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. Bobby Conway from Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. You also see him on the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. And Tony Clark, the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Newport News in Virginia. What's going on, guys?
What's up?
Yeah.
Hey.
What did you say about seconds? So yeah, for people listening to this right now, it actually might be time for seconds.
Yes.
Right?
Or thirds.
Yeah, or thirds. Yeah.
Would you pass the potato salad, please?
I'm gonna pass the mashed potatoes.
Okay. That'll work too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so give us a call if you're watching online right now. We can take your call and before 5 p.m. Pacific time. So let's begin this hour with Lynn calling from California. Hi there, Lynn.
Hi.
Thanks
good to hear all of you.
Yeah, thank you. So is that what you're thankful for, that it's good to hear us on the phone?
Well, I'm thankful for that, but I'm especially thankful for my 96-year-old mother, with whom I have wonderful, deep conversations about the Bible.
Wow. That is wonderful.
Wow. It really is. And she will often, I'll go to her place and we'll watch episodes of Pastor's Perspective on YouTube, and she really enjoys all of you.
Wow. Well, hi, Lynn's mom. Thanks for watching.
That is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, she'll be delighted to get that acknowledgement. So we were talking about the Bible and the question of the phrase, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's Proverbs 25:22.
Yeah.
25:22, and also Paul talks about it in Romans 12, at the end of Romans 12.
Right.
Yeah, verse 20.
And even starting at verse 19, where it's like, never take your own revenge, but leave room for the wrath of God, know. So my take on that has always been, that's a bad thing to have coals heaped upon your head, that you're doing a good thing, but in fact it will be a challenge for the person receiving it, the enemy who is receiving it. It will be a challenge for them. It's kind of my take. Mm-hmm. But we've realized we really don't know. And maybe there's something in the context or the culture that's entirely different. So we both thought this would be a good question for Pastor's Perspective.
You were right.
I've thrown it to you.
Tony, we'll start with you. What do you tell Lynn and her mom?
Yeah, I remember Christians using this way back in the day, using it, said, and your enemy, you bless them, you heap coals of fire on their head, you'll burn them up, but this is not meant to burn the person, but to bless them. The way that they would transport, coal and different things to the home, they will put it on their head. They would carry it in containers on their head. And so if your enemy, just like Jesus taught, if your enemy is hungry, give him something to eat. And so this way you will be a blessing to that person that is an enemy of yours, and you will bless them as you will give them that which is necessary for their home, which is coal and wood is used for cooking and for warming the house. And so it's the same principle Jesus gave for if our enemy is hungry, you feed them and you will be a blessing to them. So this is not meant, these verses falsely were interpreted back in the day to burn that person that is an enemy of yours, but it was meant to actually bless them.
Does that help you, Lynn?
It does. It's just hard for me as a 20th, 21st century person to think that having burning coals heaped on my head is a good thing. But I can see that And I had a friend from Uganda who could carry things. She would put platters on her head and carry things on her head. So I've actually seen it done, but not with burning coals. So,
and of course you wouldn't have the actual coals on top of your head. You know that, don't you?
Right.
It would have to be in a container that can house that. But you're giving your enemy that which is necessary and which is something used for cooking as well as using for warming the house. And so you're being a blessing to your enemy and not, like you've been mean to me, so I'm gonna hear some coals on top of your head and teach you to be nicer next time. No, it was not meant. It was not meant to burn them, but to bless them.
Okay, that's helpful, and that's consistent with the message through here. It's just always been one of those weird passages. So,
and it's weird. It's weird for us.
This.
Yeah, it's weird for us in our Western culture because we don't understand this kind of thing. But definitely in the biblical culture, they definitely understood, what was being said. And so it's just saying, just be a blessing to those who are enemies of yours. And God will use that to possibly bring that person to the Lord.
Lynn, thanks for your question today on this pre-recorded edition of Pastor's Perspective. Thanksgiving Day. My name is Brian Perez, and now let's go to Mary in California. Hi there, Mary. What are you thankful for?
Hi, I am thankful for my kids, even though they're not walking with the Lord. I'm thankful that God is working on them and that He goes after the 99 in this, or the one. In this case, He's going after the 3 and leaving the 97. Because I've got 3 kids. So I'm thankful He doesn't give up on us. And
Amen.
And I have been so concerned because, and I don't know if it's because my husband left our family, but my kids have struggled so badly over the last 10 years since this happened, and I've just seen them hurting. And my son, I'm 99% sure is an alcoholic. He's functional. He gets up and goes to work every day. Good worker. Comes home and drunk to the point of passing out every night. He rents a room from me, and I've never prohibited drinking. And so I don't feel like with him being his age and renting a room, even though it's my house, to just now all of a sudden say, oh, you can't drink here anymore. But I pray for him all the time. I wrote him a letter to apologize for the things that I did wrong as a mom. I know he has a lot of hurts. And, I just don't know whether, and I know it's really going to have to come from the Holy Spirit, whether or not I speak to him about it. But I just wanted to get some perspective because I don't want to speak to him, and I don't want it to be judgmental or condemning him. It's because I love him. But at the same time, I know if you're not ready to hear that when you're addicted to something, it's like, I don't want it to push him away from me either. A friend of mine suggested, well, maybe just say, is anything bothering you lately? But I don't know. I know Bobby struggled with it, but I've heard great wisdom from all of you. So anybody who has any perspective, any suggestions, I would really appreciate it.
Okay, let's start with Bobby. What do you tell Mary?
Yeah, this is such a heavy situation right here for you. And I don't think there is an easy answer. It's kind of a customized approach when it comes to dealing with situations like this because your relational dynamics with your son have been created for over a long period of time. You said that he was how old? 30-something?
25.
No, he's 25.
25. Okay, and he's living at home though. Yeah.
Right, but paying rent.
So, and paying rent. So that's a good thing. Again, as a Christian, you have to realize that if he's getting inebriated in your house, that you would not want to condone that, right? Like, so I think in my situation, if my son was getting inebriated in my house, I would feel like I have to say something. I'm morally obligated to say something, and I would not tolerate that either. I know that risks something for the relationship, but I would say that in the same way, I wouldn't just let my son bring his girlfriend over and shack up in the same bed, or, you know, so I would not allow something, you know, to take place in my house just because somebody's an addict. So I would say I would try to help bring the bottom up. And so they often talk about bottoming out or hitting rock bottom, but you don't have to hit skid row bottom. But oftentimes the difference between a low bottom and a higher bottom, Mary, is the intervention of loved ones who intervene to raise the bottom up. In other words, when people just let people do whatever they're going to do, when an addict's in an addict brain state, they're thinking about themselves. How do they scratch that itch? And so since you're his mother, and I don't know the history of the relationship there, if you can help bring that bottom up. And so the way that you can do that is, you know, number one, have a conversation, but know kind of what your goal is at the beginning. Your goal is his sobriety. Your goal is his health. Your goal is for him to not be destroying his life. So you start with that. And then this is where I'm going to be off a little bit here, and where you might need extra counsel, because there's a lot of history that goes into your relationship to your son. You know, who are the other people that can be engaged in this? How does he respond to criticism? And so this, you know, program's not designed for that kind of counsel. So I would say there's a lot more that could be said here. So take what I say with a grain of salt. The goal is to see him get clean. He's 25. You want to raise the bottom. I would say you could also say, if you were to keep up your life like this for the next 5 to 10 years, what do you think would happen? What do you think that your life's going to look like in that kind of a way? When an addict is in the throes of their addiction, if they're not ready to give it up, they'll act like they've got it all under control. And that's because they don't want to give it up. So if he starts going into things like, I've got this under control, or, you know, I've got this managed, or you're stressing, well, those are the signs that he's not ready to quit yet. He's holding on to it. And so if he's ready to quit, then you need to be prepared to go, how could I help him? So if he's wanting to quit, then I'd say, okay, well, let's talk about this. How could I help you? How could you get some treatment? I don't just want to kick you out of the house here. I understand that you might mess up here and there. How can I graciously walk with you through it? But if he's just saying, I'm not going to quit, I'm not ready to quit, I'm just going to keep doing it, then you might need to say something like, hey, okay, you've got this much time to find another place, because I just can't tolerate you living in the house like this. And either approach is your approach, trying to help him get clean, but one approach will feel a little stronger. But keep in mind, your motive, you have to remember, is only to help him get clean. And so it's tough love. The other motive is a little bit more soft love. I'm going to work with you here. So those are a couple approaches that I might share.
Brian, any thoughts?
Well, I'm curious what Mary might think about that. Mary, what do you think?
I think that's great wisdom. I will tell you, I am one who has a really, really hard time following through with consequences, which is another reason why I'm afraid to say you have X amount of time to get out of the house, because I don't know if I'll follow through. I really, really have a hard time with that. I've been praying.
How would he respond if you followed through? Would he fight you on that? Is he combative? Would he fight you on that, or would he understand that? Is it more because you fear his reaction? Does he threaten suicide and things like that? Or do you think he would just respect your wishes and go find a place, and yet you're still kind of like feeling bad and caving? Like, how does that look?
You know, I really don't know. I mean, he can be very argumentative at times. He has a really gnarly scar where I believe he tried to take his life about 10 years ago, and I didn't even know at the time, which I feel terrible about. Mm-hmm. Like, I just wonder, where was I when that was going on, that I didn't know he was suffering so bad? I don't know. I am afraid. I don't know if he would do anything to himself. And I wish I could talk to his dad, but I don't trust his dad. His dad provides him with alcohol. His dad gives the kids marijuana. And so I may need to sit down with the pastor, one of the pastors at my church too. I just, it says there's wisdom in the counsel of many. So I'm going to people I trust and getting perspectives and praying, for the right time, the right, moment and the right words,
Now, Mary, is he doing the drinking is he getting drunk at home, or is he coming home drunk, or what's that?
No, he does it at home.
He does it at home.
Thankfully, he doesn't go out and drive.
Yeah.
Which that also scares me. If I tell him to leave, I don't want him out driving drunk.
Yeah.
And most of it takes place actually after I go to sleep, because I go to sleep early and he stays up.
Yeah. And I'll
see him passed out.
So passed out meaning, I mean, you go to sleep at night. So is he, when you say getting drunk, is he just getting falling down out of his head drunk, or are you just assuming that he's drinking and falling, he's knocking out, whatever's happening, he's out?
When he goes to sleep at night, it's usually he's passed out. I'll give you an example. Last week, one day, his dad bought him the big bottle over a liter size of whiskey, and the next morning, almost half of it was gone, and the day after that, the rest of it was gone.
Wow, that's serious stuff right there. And he's by himself. He's by himself?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah. Well, I think you're talking about something there this is life-threatening. This could actually kill somebody, and if it's not attended to. So I think with Bobby's counsel, although it's hard, it's a matter, in some ways, it's a bit of a matter of life and death, one way or the other. I mean, you can't stop him from getting in a car and driving either if he's under the influence. Maybe he's not doing that now, but what if he decides to go out the door and say, I'm going to go get something to eat, but yet he's polished off a quarter of a liter of whiskey. So this might be like one of those kind of serious interventions where, and you preface it with, I love you and you're going to kill yourself and I'm not going to stand by and let you do it. So this is what is the course we're going to take.
Tony, what do you say?
Yeah, this is tough because, as a moms do whatever they can for their kids. And I know how the enemy plays upon the mind of a mom. If I put him out, something happened to him, then people and the devil and the ex-husband, it's because you put him out. That's why. If he had stayed there, it wouldn't have happened. Then she got to live with that. So it's a tough situation, but once again, it's tough love that needs to happen, because I was going to say what the great doctor said at first is that, you let them get drunk like that in your house. I was going to ask, would you let him bring his girlfriend over and she just lives there and live-in girlfriend? If you say no, then I would say, well, then why is it that you're going to allow him to just get plastered at your house? You love your son. You hate to see him like that. And that's why you're calling. So there needs to be, as the great doctor said, the bottom needs to be raised up and say, hey, bro, I love you, son. I love you, but I can't let you kill yourself right in my house. You are sloppy drunk and passed out. One day you may not wake up and then I got to live with you killing yourself with alcohol in my house. So, and then because of moms, the way they are, if he goes out and lives somewhere else, then every day you're going to be worrying about him. And is he okay? Did he pass out? that's where you got to trust God and leave people in the hands of the Lord. I was just reading that last night in the book of Acts, how a group of people got saved. And they said, look, leave them in the hands of the Lord. And so we need to leave people, even loved ones, in the hands of the Lord and allow the Lord to do the work that he's going to do. And you, as Pastor Brian mentioned in the first hour, Philippians 4, 6, and 7, you be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And you just constantly bring him before the throne of grace, and that God will give you the peace that he will take care of your 25-year-old son.
Bobby?
Yeah, a couple other thoughts that I would have, guys, is number one, if you're sharing with him, I would try to think of a story, much like Nathan did when confronting David about being in sin with Bathsheba, because what happened in that story, and if you haven't read it in a while, I would read that and then try to prayerfully come up with a story that would help your son to tap into his empathy that you're having for him. In other words, he's going to feel threatened if you mess with the alcohol. I mean, that is a very threatening thing when somebody starts coming in. That is our lowercase God when we're doing that. And we don't want anybody to mess with that. So I would say, realize that he'll feel threatened by that he'll do whatever he can to protect his God, so to speak. And so you have to not just come in and cut his God down, so to speak. Otherwise, you're going to put him on the immediate defensive. So I would say you can almost approach this where, again, I'm just thinking out loud on the spot here, but let's just say he has a dog, or he had a dog that he loved at some point, and you know this. And you were to say, imagine if you knew that your dog that you loved so much every day was getting into this particular food, and it was going to take half of his lifespan off of him because of the toxicity of the food. Would you just keep allowing him to access that food, or would you want to remove the bowl? Well, I think he would say, I'd want to remove the bowl, right? Obviously. Well, how much more valuable are you to me as my son than that dog was? And so I just want you to understand my motive here is it would be like watching something kill itself slowly. I'm concerned. So then I would say, are you concerned, right? And if he's not concerned, then again, he's protecting this, right? If he is concerned, guess what then you get to do? You get to help him to have some say in this. Well, would you like to talk with me about what it would look like to come up with a plan, whether you need to go to treatment or what that would look like? Because here's the thing as well. Sometimes I think people want to go put a plan in place for the addict, but that's not going to be all that successful. You want to get buy-in from the addict where he feels like he's a part of it, because you're dealing with something that is very, very difficult. So if you can give him a sense of your empathy through sharing a story that can help him to understand that mom's just trying to help, if you can give him some buy-in, that would be wonderful. And then figure out in the plan, is he going to need treatment, hospitalization? I mean, how bad has it gotten?
Brian, any other thoughts?
Well, I think we probably ought to move on and not overwhelm Mary with, I mean, there's a lot of advice she's just received from us here. So I think Mary, you understand. You obviously get the point, and undoubtedly you're more concerned than we are. This is your son. I would just say, I know your struggle from a personal place, because I went through this with one of my kids, and it is very, very difficult. And it was very difficult to make those hard decisions. And yet those hard decisions were a lifesaver. And so I just want to encourage you out of love. I mean, That's the bottom line. You love your son, and that's why you're going to do what you're going to do. And he might not understand that or like that right now, but he will later.
Yep. Mary, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. We're not live today on Thanksgiving, if that's when you're listening, but you can call us if you're watching on Tuesday when we record this episode. The number's right there on the bottom of your screen, and we are here until 5 p.m. Pacific time on this Tuesday, the 22nd of 2022. Ken in California, what are you thankful for?
Well, I'm thankful for what I don't have.
What don't you have?
I don't have any children.
And you're thankful because of that?
Oh, very much so. I would not want to bring anybody into this world that we live in.
Okay.
So.
And does that tie in with your question?
No, my question is actually, I've always had a hang up with the fact that we all know that life is not fair. But it would be nice if it was a little bit more even. I am richly blessed in many ways, and I find it difficult when I see people that aren't in those ways. But it refers to Ezra 10, where the Israelites had these pagan wives and their children, and then they were asked to put them away. Well, that's a heck of a hand to be dealt for those children. The pagan wives might be evil and going to hell, but those children were dealt a really bad hand, and I just would like your perspective on that.
Okay. Bobby, what do you tell Ken?
I'm sympathetic to that question, Ken. I've read that passage and felt vexed by it as well. I became a Christian because I was wanting my sins forgiven, right? And I believe that Jesus died and rose from the grave, and there I started walking with Christ. But then all of a sudden you start learning, well, if you are a real Christian, then you got to, believe in every single word of the Bible. And I thought, okay. So I started reading the Bible and just trying to square all that up. But that doesn't mean there aren't things that aren't hard for me to digest. There are. That's a very, very hard passage right there. And I wish I could say that's the only hard passage in the Bible. When the earth opens up and swallows up the people, there's just a lot of tough passages. How do we reconcile Ezra chapter 10? I would say I'm not convinced that what I'm going to share is going to give you the emotional ease that you might like. All I can do is try to tell you how I try to live with the discomfort of that. And it should make us uncomfortable a little bit, right? We're talking about try to stand in the shoes and imagine all of a sudden a bunch of husbands wishing off their wives and kids, and now they're leaving. That's a hard scene. So on one side, Ken, I would say there's something special in your heart that's bothered by that, because it's hard to imagine kids not being taken care of. So I'd say that there's something that I would see that's good, right? What wouldn't be good is to think that God's not good because of this. So how do we fix this? I would say we need to realize that these pagan women that were left, number one, they never should have been their spouses to begin with. So there was automatic rebellion from the beginning. God had already warned the community not to go into marriage. So in other words, I'll finish it after the break because I'm getting warmed up here.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
All right. We will continue this conversation when we come back from the break on this pre-recorded edition of Pastor's Perspective. We're not live if you're listening on the radio on Thanksgiving Day, but if you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok, you can call us. We've got the number right there on the bottom of your screen. And it's Brian Brodersen, Bobby Conway, and Tony Clark answering your questions until 5 p.m. Pacific time on this Tuesday. All right, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Stand by. This is Pastor's Perspective. Thank you so much for listening on the radio on this Thanksgiving Day. Yes, we are very thankful that you are listening. And if you are thinking that we're here in the studio on this Thanksgiving Day, we're not. We're having thirds now. And we recorded this episode on Tuesday, the 22nd. So if you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok, you see the number there on the bottom of your screen. You can call us until 5 p.m. Pacific time today. We'd love to hear from you. Answering your questions today, Brian Brodersen, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, Tony Clark from Calvary Chapel, Newport News in Virginia, and the great doctor, Bobby Conway, the 1 Minute Apologist channel guy. And you can see him on YouTube. He's also the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, right before the break, we were speaking with Ken in California, who brought up this passage in Ezra chapter 10. And, you brought up a good point, Bobby. Ken seems like the kind of guy that he's got this soft spot in his heart for kids. I mean, even when we asked him, what are you thankful for, Ken? He said, I'm glad I don't have any kids to have them living in a world like we're living in right now. And Ken sees this passage in Ezra 10, and he says, this wasn't right, what was done to these women and children. And the music started, so we couldn't finish your thought, Bobby, but go ahead. Yeah. It's all yours.
Yeah. And I, as a father, I'd have to say what I'm thankful for is my kids on Thanksgiving. I could never imagine thanking God for not having kids when I think of what a blessing they are. And not only that, that's also part of God's plan for spreading the kingdom. I mean, this is one of the reasons that they'll say Islam will overtake Christianity in the future, because they're going to outbirth us, right? So we don't, not have kids because it's a rough spot to live. We have kids and we raise them to hopefully love the Lord and be missional difference makers. But Ezra 10 is this passage where basically the husbands are asked to send away their foreign pagan wives with their kids. And this is a hard passage, and this is the question before us. First off, they were never supposed to have foreign wives, is where I was going. That was already dealt with. So it's interesting how we can often kind of think, oh, why would God allow this to happen in the Bible? But we need to realize, why did they break God's command? Why did they go collect foreign wives? Like, in other words, it's man's fault. It's not God's fault, right? Like, they should have never took these wives. Number two, God, when he sent his people into Canaan to take down Jericho, after patiently waiting, for about 400 years, what was to happen? They were to remove all of the Canaanite belief system, right? That was there. I mean, these were people who sacrificed their children to their God. So I would say God was wanting to do something fresh through his people. So when you think about Ezra and Nehemiah, what's happened? Well, they just came out of captivity for 70 years because of following the ways of the nation around them. Now they're getting a fresh start. Ezra's going back. The walls are going to go up. And so people start thinking, wait a second, if we're already engaged in the thing that led us into captivity to begin with, we're off to a bad start. Okay, so how do we remedy this? Well, you need to separate from yourselves these pagan wives. Now, how can we understand at this stage? Number one, the very fact that the pagan wives left and didn't stay showed that they weren't interested in setting up something to honor God. They weren't interested in raising their kids to honor God. What they wanted was what they wanted. So they could have given themselves over to Yahweh and become a believer, like Rahab became a believer. Like, they could have become that. And perhaps there was some of those people that made that decision. But we need to realize that those who were going away because they were rejecting God. They were rejecting what he stood for. And so that should also comfort us. I would say, number three, it's possible, because they probably went back to their pagan nations, it's possible that an offering was taken up. I mean, we only got a little bit of context here. We don't know that there was no provisions made whatsoever. I mean, what if there was an offering taken up? What if there was something that was set up of a benevolent system that every so often certain funds were taken over? What if there was an agreement with the leadership between the God's covenant people and the leadership of the pagan nation that these women are going to be coming back? We want to make sure their provisions are cared for. So just because we don't get a lot about what happens to the kids after the fact, we don't know that there weren't provisions later that were discussed. So those are the kind of things that my brain would think through to try to, just find rest. Nevertheless, my heart still would hurt for these kids.
Yeah, Brian?
Yeah, I think Bobby's point, the last point, is a key. One other one I would add to that is there's no reference here to God commanding them to do anything. This is their way of remedying this problem. Was it the right way to do it? Maybe. It doesn't say. This is descriptive. It's just telling us what happened.
That's right.
And I think the key, though, Bobby, is what you said last. I think there's even the passage itself. Even in the context, they say, okay, this is a complicated situation. This cannot be resolved in 1 or 2 days, which to me indicates that it wasn't just, hey, pack them up and throw them out. There was a process of looking at each and every situation and deciding what to do. And I would imagine that since they're seeking to be righteous people at this point, they would have done the righteous thing in regard to at least taking care to some extent of the wives and the children who were departing. So I think if we read it the other way, we're reading something into the text that's not there. It doesn't say that they were abused or mistreated or just kicked out into the gutter and never to be cared about. And I think, if they're getting back to following the law of God, then they're going to also have those compassionate elements that are going to be operating. So,
Tony Clark.
Yeah, that was good. What Pastor Brian just mentioned, and we do just have what the scripture says in our minds. We're thinking, there's God being a bad dude again. God is being a bad God again. Here he is in these verses.
That judgmental God from the Old Testament.
Yes, and here's another case of that. And we just read into those verses things that are not there. They had to get radical. They just, here they are going back into behavior that brought them into captivity. And I'm sure when they separated from the wives and their children, that was painful. No different than Abraham when Abraham was told, hey, Ishmael and his mother Hagar, they gotta go. That was painful for Abraham. Yep. But Ishmael was Abraham's way of trying to help God out. And it wasn't right. So God said, okay, you've done this, but now they need to go. Because, I have the plan that I originally had for you. So whenever we try to help God out, whenever we do things contrary to him, when we're trying to correct that, it's going to be painful. And sure enough, I'm sure that the separation from them is from these wives and children was painful. But I agree with what the great doctor said, is that here it is. They had an opportunity to embrace the God of Israel. They could have. But I believe, it's just a guess, that they probably left and said, I don't want no God of Israel. And so I'm taking me and my kids and we're out of here. And say, okay, all right, you had a choice. And so I don't see it as once again, here's the God of the Old Testament being this mean dude again. No, I don't see that at all. I think they had a choice because it took time for them to do this separation. And I'm sure they had a choice because we know from Joshua on down, choose ye this day whom you're going to serve. And those foreign wives said, we want to stay foreign. And you know what? We're out of here if that's what you feel. And we're taking our babies with us. And I'm sure it broke their hearts.
Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, if you want another example on this, I love the story of Ruth. Yeah. I really think it could have been called the Book of Naomi, because it's about Naomi, whose name means pleasant. She becomes Mara, which means bitter, and she learned to become pleasant again. But Ruth was a Moabite. And Ruth would say, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God shall be my God. And so these wives could have been more Ruth-like, and they didn't do that. And you just got to try to understand the scene. Like, you've just come out after your people have been in captivity. Yes, and now you're thinking, wait, we've got the same problem on our hand. How are you going to build something if you've got a bunch of wives that want to carry on pagan idolatry? So I would say we have to really feel that out. I think what Brian said was spot on too. I mean, this is just, we're just getting Shechaniah's report of here's the solution, gang. The last thing that I would say is this. There's lots of passages like this, like the David's census, for example. And here's your three options. Where I read and I'm having my quiet time and I feel troubled on the front end. But you know what happens? It's like this conversation that we're having. Without a doubt, every single time I'll give God the benefit of the doubt. I'll recognize that I'm just separated by time, and I'll think about it. And there's in my opinion, a great explanation that can emerge, or one that's sufficient enough that I can give God the benefit of the doubt. And that's what I would say we should always be doing. Anytime that, listen, when we get to a point where we're not giving God the benefit of the doubt, you know what we start doing? We're starting to think we're more just than God. And I don't want to start thinking like that, because there's times I've read the Bible where if you're looking at my heart, I think that my heart would be like, well, my goodness, I'm more just than God. I wouldn't do this. And I'm going, my goodness, that is not something I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think if we're honest, I think we've all done that at times. And I think, but the moment you do that, you kind of start to reel it back in and go, okay, wait a second. I'm not seeing the whole picture here, because if I think I'm more just than God, then we really got some interpretive issues, some hermeneutical issues here that we need to work on. So, and I think again, it kind of, if we go back to who God is, and Pastor Chuck used to give this great message on the importance of not giving up we know for the things we don't know. So, there's lots of things we don't know, but here's what we do know. We do know that God is good. We do know that God is love. We have a demonstration of the love of God, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. And so, okay, if I see things through that lens, if I see things through the lens of who God reveals himself to be, merciful, compassionate, and long-suffering, and plenteous in mercy, and so forth, then when I see these passages, I'm going to think the best, not the worst. If I think the worst, it's because my concept of God is distorted.
Yeah. Pastor Chuck did say that. He said when you don't know something, you fall back on that which you do know. And we do know that God is love and he's gracious. And that helps when we come across passages like this and we just saying, okay. And on top of it, there's some things we just don't know right now. God will reveal it as we keep reading or something. And this is just one of those cases. We need to fall back on that which we do know, that God is love, he's gracious, he's kind, and all those sorts of things. And then we start kind of making sense of difficult passages like this.
Great conversation on this pre-recorded edition of Pastor's Perspective. Ken, thank you for calling us with that question. Now we're going to go to Pat in Arizona. Pat, what are you thankful for on this Thanksgiving Day?
Oh my gosh, I have an embarrassment of things. Just so blessed with salvation through Jesus, a family that has salvation through Jesus. Long-time K-Wave listener.
Even in Arizona.
Calvary Chapel. Well, I'm on an app. I'm really from California, but I'm on an app and listening to you all day today. And now my question seems almost silly when I finally get to it. But I date back to the tent and Pastor Chuck in 1972. I attend Calvary Chapel, Norco now. Love the station, love you guys. And you were talking about Romans. And right now, Pastor J. Vernon McGee, who I've followed since he was alive, is in Romans right now. And I wondered what you thought about his exposition on Romans.
Are you guys familiar with it?
And by the way, I'm also blessed today, my 84th birthday, and beat cancer 4 years ago. So praise God.
Yay!
Oh, happy birthday.
Well,
Thank you.
Pat, I would never, just by your voice, I would never think I'm speaking to an 84-year-old.
She sounds so young.
Yeah, she does. So,
well, I can't zip line or tap dance anymore, but yeah, I'm in great shape.
I never have zip lined or tap danced, so you're way ahead of me there.
That's great. Just quickly, Pat, J. Vernon McGee is excellent in so many areas, and I've read his commentary on Romans, and he does a tremendous job.
So he's kosher all the way.
Oh yeah.
Two thumbs up. Mm-hmm. Yep, we love Dr. McGee. You can hear him here on our flagship station, K-Wave, at 9:30 a.m. Monday through Friday, and on Sunday mornings at 7. So get the K-Wave app, just like Pat did, and you can listen anytime. All right, back to the phones. Here is Jack in California. What are you thankful for, Jack?
I'm just extremely thankful for you, man. And your ministry. You touch so many lives with sharing your thoughts and commentaries on the Word. And I'm also thankful for my family and getting the opportunity to spend Thanksgiving with my immediate family.
Well, praise God for that.
Yeah.
What did you want to know today?
And so, well, I'm in a chapter a day men's Bible email thread where we do a chapter a day during the week. And so we've been doing it for like 8 years now. And so this time through, we're in Ezekiel, and I'm a little bit on the simple-minded side. And so starting in 40, just recently we were up to 40, and it's like the new temple area, and they talk about the temple and so forth. And one of the guys posted some pictures of an artist that did a rendition of the new temple, and on the top it said the Millennium New Temple. And so I was thinking, because there's furniture and things to do sacrifices, I was shocked to hear that it was the Millennium, and maybe it isn't, because I know my Lord, your Lord, our Lord died for our sins, and why? And my thoughts are, why would they be doing sacrifices if it was the Millennium Temple? And so I just wanted your comments on that.
Okay. Tony, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's been a thought for many people. If Jesus is the fulfillment of these sacrifices and that sort of thing, and we know that the millennial kingdom, he will be physically reigning on the earth at that particular time. There were some who suggest that that this millennial kingdom is kind of a foreshadowing, not necessarily foreshadowing, but a showing what Jesus did for us. Because the sacrifices will be instituted again. And people are asking, well, what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose when Jesus is right there? And some suggest for the Jews that are there during the millennial kingdom. But then the question is asked again, well, but Jesus is there. So what's the purpose of them? And to be honest with you, I don't have a clear enough answer where I can settle in and say, 100% this is the reason. I just know this temple is going to be rebuilt again. Sacrifices is going to be reinstituted. We know David is going to have a key part during the millennial kingdom as well. And so, I don't have a clear enough answer to land on, to be able to say, this is definitely the reason why.
How about you, Brian?
Yes, I have a crystal clear answer. I know the answer to this question.
Great.
It is, as Tony said, and as you've sensed, Jack, it is one of those perplexing passages based upon much of what the New Testament tells us, especially Hebrews. When you read Hebrews about the one sacrifice forever and so forth, it's like, okay, wow, what is this? And so because of that, many interpreters have decided that this is not a literal temple, that these are obviously not going to be literal sacrifices, because that would sort of be like you're undoing the sacrifice of Jesus. And so those who hold to what's called the amillennial position on eschatology, they would just see this as all spiritual. This is a spiritual temple. It's not talking about anything literal. The problem I have with that is when you read it, it seems very, very literal.
Very literal.
And
yes,
so is there a way to resolve it? And I think there is a way to resolve it. Not everybody would agree with me on this, but funny enough, I was just thinking about this. I think it was yesterday. And I think the way to resolve it is that the sacrifices are real, but they are not actually efficacious for sin, because that sacrifice has already been once and forever made. But they are memorial sacrifices. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about it, and I've taught this many times, so it's not anything new to me, but think about it. The church, for 2,000 years, we have had the bread and the cup. We've had the Lord's Supper, as we call it. And what do? It's a memorial. What do we remember? The bread is the body that was broken for you. The cup is the blood that was shed for you. So we remember that. The Israelites, the people of Israel, for 2,000 years, they've had nothing because they have rejected the Messiah. So I've kind of seen it as this will be their memorial. They will have a rebuilt temple. They will have a sacrificial system that is instituted. The thing is, Hebrews tells us those sacrifices never took away sin in the first place.
Right.
They were just, they were pointing towards something. So just as the sacrifices then pointed towards something, these sacrifices will point back to something. So Israel will now have its memorial of the death of Jesus for them. So here they are. Here's Jesus, their King, their Messiah, Yahweh in their midst, sitting upon the throne, and these sacrifices are to remind them this is the cost for you being here and this kingdom being what it is. So that's my way of understanding it.
I like that.
Jack, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's see if we can squeeze in one more. Tom, first of all, what are you thankful for?
I'm thankful for my salvation.
Praise God.
Amen.
Yes. I'll try to squeak my question in. It's basically, how were the Old Testament saints saved? But I've heard teachers say that the Old Testament saints were looking forward to a Messiah, and we look backward to a Messiah. Mm-hmm. But are these statements really biblical? Genesis 12, 15, and 17 talk about a promise of a child, a nation, of nations, and of land. And Genesis 22, we have Isaac being spared. So it's not clear that Abraham had faith in a Messiah, but rather in God's ability to restore life and to keep his promises. I know that it's answered for Abraham in John 8:56, where it says, and Abraham saw it and was glad. But what about all the other Old Testament saints? And I don't know if you even have time to answer, but God bless you all.
We'll ask. Okay, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, quickly, we're saved by grace through faith. Ephesians 2:8-9, for by grace you have been saved through faith. And what's funny is that is the same way anybody else is saved. Back in Genesis 6:8, it says, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And we know that it was by faith that Abraham and all those others, because in Genesis 12:3, Genesis 15:6, as well as Galatians 3, it talks about how all these things are put together, we're saved by grace through faith.
Hope that helps, Tom. And we are out of time. Thank you so much for listening to Pastor's Perspective today. We surely are thankful for all of you, our listeners, our viewers on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. God bless you all. And we will be back live. Let me see. If you're listening on the radio on Thursday, we won't be live again until Monday. Yes, we're going to do a live program on Monday. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok, we will be here tomorrow, Wednesday. So God bless you guys.
Thanks, and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Yes. Happy Thanksgiving,
guys.
For Brian Brodersen, Bobby Conway, and Tony Clark, I'm Brian Perez. Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.